And welcome back. Well, you can see here we got you zoomed in on our cylinder head. And if you remember, the passenger side cylinder head, which is what you're seeing here, when we disassembled the engine, had a broken exhaust bolt in here at this upper corner, which is not uncommon with Hemis of this vintage. Unfortunately, they're kind of famous for these exhaust bolts breaking. Now, thankfully, and we've run in this before with their 2009, but also on this 2012, thankfully it was just the one bolt here in the corner. So what we're going to work on right now, before we start disassembling all the valves and getting all the springs out, because we did purchase a new set of valves to lap into these existing heads, as well as the upgraded cam. It's going to require different valve springs, different shims under the valves, and different retainers here at the top. So a lot of this hardware is going to get replaced. I think the only thing we're going to actually keep out of this head, other than the cylinder head itself, is just the keepers for the valve stems. But before we do that, we want to see if we can get this broken off bolt here extracted. So what I'm going to do first, and this is just a spring-loaded punch, is that I'm going to try to get as center of that bolt as we can, and we're going to punch it and we're going to drill it up a couple of steps until we can get one of our decent sized easy outs in there to help thread that out. Because what will happen with these particular easy outs is they're reverse threaded, so as you tighten them in to try to get it to bite onto the bolt, it'll actually spin the bolt backwards to loosen it out. So that's what I'm going to work on now. And let's see here. It's about center right there. And I'll put an Amazon link in the description to all these, so you heard us hit that. And again, just a spring-loaded punch. Hit that about a good 4 or 5 times. Now we got a nice little divot there in the center. I don't think I got you zoomed in as close as I can. The camera may not pick that up, but I can visibly see it. And then normally what I like to do, we've got a nice set of, not a sponsor, but I just happen to have them, a nice set of Milwaukee titanium bits. I usually like to start out with a relatively small bit to get in there, and then just generally step it up kind of in increments until I get up to a fairly decent sized hole inside that bolt that we can get a nice size easy out into. So rather than let you suffer through, especially if you're wearing a pair of headphones, through a bunch of drilling activity, again, I'm just going to start with a small bit here. I think this is probably a 3/32. There we go. Once I get it out of the drill case, that is. Yeah, and I can fill that divot right about there. So I'm going to start with that. I'm going to drill this up, and as we get closer to extracting that bolt, I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So I started out actually with a 5/64 and then worked up to a 3/32. We got a pretty good size hole in there, but actually as I was drilling this, that stud started to move a little bit on its own. So it's pretty good and free at this point. So I'm just looking over our easy out kit that we have. We've got several in here, and again, I'll put a link in the description below if I can find this set. And then I'm just going to find one to fit that, or one that'll give us a decent bite. I don't want to go too small with this because I don't want to break the extractor. That'll end for a bad day. Okay, let me try this one, which looks to be maybe a step down from 10, so maybe a 9. Looks like it's a number 9, at least in this kit. And it's just got a little holder, a little extractor fits into, and then that holder can then be fit into a driver bit if you want to take it that way. Or what I like to do is just find a socket that'll fit that first adapter and go on from there. Now, if your bit's big enough, you can also hit the bit itself, but this bit's fairly small, so I'm just going to use the holder it came with. Let's see if I got a socket that'll fit this holder. Yep, that'll do it. That's a 7mm. So you can see what I'm just going to do here. So if I twist, like I want to remove that bolt, that I don't want to call them, it's not a, it is an easy out, but not a name brand easy out. It'll cause that extractor to want to thread into that hole, and then hopefully this bolt, there she goes. Okay, she's turning. Nice. You can see that. Okay, so our extractor is getting a little bit tight there, so I don't want to overdo it. But you can see we did get it started. So what I'm going to do is get a little bit of penetrant fluid on there, because I think it's just picking up dirt and debris inside the thread, stopping that from spinning. Now what I may do is go up to the next size extractor. We may have to drill that a little bit more, because again, I don't want to put too much torque on that really small extractor there and end up snapping the top of that extractor off. So let me go get some penetrant fluid and I'll bring you right back. One moment. And welcome back. So I got just a little bit of PB Blaster on there just to give it some lube. I'm going to go up to the next size extractor just so there's a little bit more meat on it. And we'll see if we can get this to back the rest of the way out. Yeah, it's starting to bind up a little bit. Might have to go with something a bit meatier. Yeah. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm just going to go up here to the next size bit. Now, one thing we could do, if we can get this to back out a little bit more, because we got a pretty decent amount of thread on there. Now, you could at this point, if you had a welder, just weld yourself a bolt to that and probably take that the rest of the way out. Or what we could also do is that may be enough already just to get a nice set of vice grips or other locking type pliers. I'm gonna drill on that a little bit and probably go up to the next size hole in the next size extractor and see if we can get that to turn out any more. So let me work on that and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So we drilled this out a little bit more and the bit kind of caught it and kind of started pushing it back down inside the thread, but it allowed us to get some more penetrant in there and a slightly bigger size extractor. And as you can see, now that we're through the top of that, we're through the gunk, there we go. Nice. So we've got the bottom half of our bolt, or what's left of our bolt, extracted at this point. So that's nice. It gives us a little bit of a sigh of relief there. Threads look all right in all of these bolt holes. So what we'll do next is I'm going to get it flipped over here, basically valve side up. Not valve side up, but spring side up. And I'll bring you in and I'll show you the utility that we're going to use to help depress these springs so we can get all the keepers out in order to get the springs and everything else out next. So one moment. And also generally what I find on these, and I heard another mechanic say this on his channel as well, the nice thing is with these heads being aluminum and these bolts being steel is that generally what will happen is usually the bolt, at least in my case with these Hemis, the bolt won't corrode to the cylinder head. Not as bad as it would if the head were steel and the bolt was also steel. I think it also explains part of the reasons why those bolts have a tendency of breaking, or at least the old version of those bolts, is because this bolt being steel is going to expand and contract with heat at a different rate than the aluminum cylinder head would. Anyway, I digress. I'll bring right back. And welcome back. So I just got you. As you can see, we got our head flipped up at this point, just going through the process of breaking loose the spark plugs at this point, the old plugs, just in the process of getting these taken out. And one thing I wanted to show you here, forgive the noise, let me get this box out of the way so I'm not hitting it every time I turn the ratchet. One thing I noticed on this cylinder head, when we were first putting it back together and getting it back on the road, is that, you know, to each their own. I'll let you see this here. You can see these are Autolite plugs, which is not something you would generally see in a Hemi motor. Now, they are copper plugs, which, you know, according to the manual, is the plug that you can run on a Hemi, but generally what they want you to run and what they come with from the factory are normally NGK spark plugs. And not only that, but it also is recommended that for longevity of the spark plug as well as the motor, they actually use the iridium plugs in them now as opposed to copper. Again, not saying that you can't use copper, but you know, I wouldn't use, again, just my preference, but I wouldn't use Autolites in a Hemi motor. I would stick with what they come with from the factory, which is NGKs. Yeah, they're just gummy from a bunch of dirt that's in them, and of course, who knows when they were changed last. Actually, I have to say a correction on that one. These are actually, they look to be Autolite. Maybe Autolite iridiums, because you see that tip, it's got that nice pointed tip on it. So I thought maybe these were copper plugs at first. They're not. They're actually XPs, but they're still an Autolite plug. But again, like I said, to each their own. If it comes from the factory with NGKs in it, I prefer to run NGKs. And that's what we'll be going back in here is NGK laser iridiums. But remember, we're going to be going a step colder than normal, just because we're going to be running supercharged. Okay, so I'm going to work on getting the rest of these out, just so you're not seeing me doing the same task over and over again. I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So I got you zoomed in here. Got you zoomed in on what is the number 2 exhaust valve at this point. And if you might be able to see, I'll pan you up a little bit. You can see we took the intake one out already. A little bit of a fiasco with that one, but if this one does the same thing, I'll kind of explain to you what we're doing. But the tool that we're using is put out by Power Stop. It's a POW352003. And it's basically single valve at a time type tool. I've used it on several sets of Hemi heads at this point. And what you do is you have this piece here, which has your main bolt, which will push down on a cage, and basically pushing down on this retainer as well as spring, hopefully allow us to get our keepers out. Now, sometimes these keepers can be a little bit of a bear. I've had them stick before, and the one on the intake side also stuck on us, and I'll explain a bit more. I'm hoping this one might do the same thing, but what I like to do is leave these two side bolts here loose, because this bolts into 2 columns that would usually be the rocker shafts. And then leave it loose so you can kind of get everything lined up. And there is a little bit of grease on top of this cage as well, because it does have a ball bearing that this main screw up here top will pivot onto. And usually right about there, where you tighten this up hand tight, and it kind of brings everything into alignment. I like to come in and then just tighten these down a little bit. Now, you don't want to use, I'll pan you up a little bit, you don't want to use impacts on this, and there's no need to go 1,800 foot-pounds on this either. You just want them snugged up where they're going to stay in spot. Hand snug only seems to be all that's needed. And then we can take our ratchet and then crank down our main bolt. And sometimes what happens is exactly kind of what you're seeing here, where you can see it's compressed the spring. And if we pick the cylinder head up, you can see the valve is even started to come out, but those keepers are stuck into that retainer, probably just because of gum and debris and dirt, things of that nature. And plus it looks like they're original to this gear slash motor slash cylinder head, so there's probably never had service work on it. Now generally what I like to do sometimes, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, is just to get a couple of blocks, something that isn't going to mar up the mating surface or mar up the valves, especially if you're going to keep them. Now in this case, I think I may mention this in the previous shot. If I didn't, we're going to be going with all new Melling valves. Part numbers V3194 and V3195. So we're going to be going with a new set of intake and exhaust valves, and we're going to lap them into the existing head. Again, unless we find something that's really wrong that would warrant us taking these to a machine shop and letting them cut new valve seats. But so far so good. They look okay, and the engine was, like I said, running. It wasn't having any compression issues. But like I said, and we'll get to all that in a little bit later video, but to digress here, so you can kind of see it's pushing the entire assembly down, because this spring compressor, unlike others, it doesn't have like a C-clamp that would normally come around and push up against the valve and keep the valve from pushing out. And again, like I said, I usually like to use maybe some type of block of rubber, something to just kind of press up against that valve, a couple of blocks of rubber, maybe a little stack of folded Post-it notes. You've seen me use these before. Put these in here, rock the head forward so that way the valve is resting on this stack of material, and then sometimes you can just push straight down on the head to get these to pop free. Now again, I'm not worried about necessarily damaging these, and you can see that valve actually spins quite freely where it's at. It's just those keepers on the end of that stem that's holding it in place. But you can also do this. If this doesn't work, I also found I'm just using a rubber mallet, and we should be able to come in here and just give it some light taps. Now you got to be careful, because when it's to shoot forward and it finally gives, sometimes those keepers will just fly out and kind of go wherever. And I don't know if you heard that, but you heard that tone change, and then you heard those keepers finally give. And generally, if you tilt it forward, normally what happens is these keepers just kind of, they'll shoot wherever they can kind of get around this cage. And that's why I like working inside one of these plastic trays, is now we get to play hunt for the keeper. And there's the second one, so it fell through. Now generally, like I said, sometimes you don't have to do that. Sometimes those springs will compress just fine, but we are going to keep these. So I've been putting these into a separate baggie away from everything else, because on this build we're going to have all new springs, new shims, new retainers, which is why we're going to go ahead and go with new valves as well. Like I said, the reason why these were not dropped off at the machine shop like the block was, is I didn't see anything in there that looked too damaging, at least not yet. That would basically, dictate to me that, we need new valve seats and all that cut. Now, granted, depending on if these valves don't lap okay, or if we end up with a sealing problem, then we may end up having to take these down to the machine shop and just pay them a little bit more on top of what we already have, and just have them rework the heads. But we worked quite a few heads on this channel successfully, and hopefully that'll continue. Let me grab my cage. Yeah, what fell was the little cage. It depresses. I see it. One moment. There it is. So we got our cage back. You can see we just took the tension off our center bolt and then took our 2 side mounting bolts out. Now we could take our spring out, and that's the factory shim underneath. And of course, this is the old retainer at the top, which again, all of that hardware is being replaced. Now, I'll throw this hardware in a bag and keep it in case we ever need it for something, but that's where it sits. Now, let's see if we can get this valve out of here. Okay, yeah. That one's sliding out nice and easy. Okay, perfect. So again, there's your old exhaust valve, and we'll be getting replaced. But what I am doing is I'm just putting bags together, labeling it by cylinder. And in this case, this is passenger side first cylinder. So this would be the front of the motor. So this is going to go 2, 4, 6, 8, down, down. So I'm just going to put these together. So that way we can remember that those came out of cylinder 2 in case we should need them for whatever reason. And then we'll go from there. So what I'm going to do is, let me get you panned back up here. So I got you zoomed in pretty far so you can hopefully see all of that. Again, while you're in here working, just be mindful. Like I said, a lot of these internal edges are sharp. They got a nice edge to them. So just be careful when you're kind of moving this cylinder head around. So what we're going to do go through and do is do the rest of this and get the rest of this hardware out of here. And then the next thing we'll do when we bring you back is that we'll just get a little pair of vice grip needle nose on here and rock these old valve seats out. Because what we want to do is, again, prep these to start cleaning them. And normally what I like to do is get all the hardware off of these, and then we'll put them inside one of those big concrete mixing trays you see me use to catch transmission fluid, oil, things of that nature. And we're going to thoroughly soak these down with some WD-40 to help loosen up a lot of this grit and debris and the old head gasket sealant and so on and so forth. So let me get to cracking on this, and I'll bring you back in a moment. And welcome back. So you can see in this one, we've got all their springs and our retainers out. And I wanted to show you, I'm going to try this on the other head. Hopefully we have one that'll cooperate. But I just wanted to show you taking those retainers or those keepers out, using a magnet to fish them out. But unfortunately, at least on this passenger side cylinder head, they were all pretty stuck. So we had to kind of, as you saw in the previous segment, get the valve exposed enough where we could just, once again, give it some light taps with a rubber mallet to get those keepers to free up. But we did get them all to free up. We were able to track them all down by playing hunt the keeper. So far we've been able to find all of them. But what I wanted to show you next is just removing these valve stem seals. Normally what I like to do is just get on the very top of them with a pair of needle nose vice grips, get a good grip on them, rock them from side to side. I'm losing my grip a little bit because I'm working around the camera. But let me widen the jaws up. There we go. And like everything else on this engine, the stuff is stuck. There you go. Just get a little needle nose vice grips on them. Just clip them, work them from side to side, and generally you can get them out. And yes, this is a destructive process to do this, but as we stated with earlier, we're going to be putting all new valve stem seals on when we get to that point. So that'll be the next step. I'm just going to go around, pull the rest of these valve stems out, and then we'll get the driver's side cylinder head up here, and we'll work on it next. One moment. And welcome back. So you can see that we've got all our springs, valves, shims, retainers, and keepers. We get all our hardware off at this point, to include, remember, remove that broken bolt earlier, as well as the spark plugs. And what you see here is that we've got both cylinders now just sitting inside once again, one of our big concrete mixing tubs. They're very, very, very versatile. And if you watch this channel and seen the previous videos, we use these for all kinds of things. And what I'm doing now is we got a big old can of WD-40 here. We see the big blast with a big spray nozzle on it, and we're just soaking everything down with WD-40. Because one thing that I like to do is, before I begin a really major clean on these, is just to soak them down with WD-40, and that helps to loosen up the carbon, the sealant from the old head gasket, as well as the grime and the grit and everything else that are on the outside of these. And then once these have had a couple of days to soak, and we will come out here a couple of times and just repeat the application a few times, and then once they've had time to soak, then we'll come over with some red Scotch-Brite, which is finer than the green stuff. And then we'll use a solvent that the cylinder heads are used to seeing. In this case, what I like to use is some True Fuel that I can pick up at, that you can pick up at Lowe's and Home Depot, things of that nature. And what it is ethanol-free 4-cycle fuel that you can get for lawnmowers and such. Now, if you can get ethanol-free at your local gas station, then by all means go pick up a gallon there. But I prefer to use that because gasoline's a solvent, so it'll also help with getting rid of the glue and the carbon and things of that nature. But it's also a solvent that the aluminum cylinder heads are used to seeing, so we're not really going to damage the cylinder heads by using it. So that, conjunction with a very fine piece of Scotch-Brite, again, being mindful that we don't concentrate too much on one area and just kind of keep it going over the surface of this, usually does a pretty good job of getting these cylinder heads cleaned up and prepped and ready for reinstall. But like I said, what we're going to do here is just continue to spray these down with some WD-40, let it do its job, let it soften everything up for us and kind of, do a little pre-work for us. And then I'll bring you back for the next video when we get down to doing a little bit more in-depth on the cleaning. Now, once the cleaning's complete, then we'll start looking at lapping our new valves into our existing valve seats. And I've ordered some equipment, which should be fun to play with. We'll have to assemble it once it's here. But I'm going to duplicate a setup that's been done on other channels that will help us once we get the things cleaned up, get the new valves lapped in, get everything mated up. Then we're going to do basically a pressure test or a vacuum test on our valves to make sure that all of our intakes and exhausts are seating within an acceptable margin before we do our reassembly. So that should be a pretty fun one coming up. So if you haven't subscribed already, please consider doing so. If you have, I thank each and every one of you immensely. We are knocking on the door of 1,900 subscribers at this point, and I thank each and every one of you for that. So with that being said, it's going to be a little bit shorter of a video on this one. Just wanted to show you the tear down and kind of the pre-cleaning steps on this, which, as you can see here, the reason why we're going with the big blast nozzle, because you get a lot of coverage with very little spray. So again, we're just dousing these down, and like I said, we'll keep it this way for a little while. But I will let you go, and I'll bring you back for the next one. Thank you much. Bye.